drags on. In the remote town of Bandera, the scenes of suffering are as bad as ever. The civilian relief effort has done wonders, though. Without it, the death toll would be many times higher. But until the military operation reaches such outlying places, the food chain is stretched dangerously thin. UNICEF Deputy Director Richard Jolly was trying to plan for the future today with the local elders. Planting crops, reopening schools, rebuilding a whole society. But none of that is possible until the troops arrive.
We're waiting for peace to come. The troops have still not arrived. They may be a week, 2 weeks, even 3 weeks possibly off before stability comes. But then I think we can be confident, particularly if this broader process of development gets going, that we can be confident that one is seeing a dramatic and sustained improvement.
The troops are pushing inland, massing at Baladogli Air Base, ready to secure Baidoa. Then the real humanitarian mission can begin. However, there's growing controversy over reports that the United Nations has a second, secret objective to disarm Somalia's warring factions and pacify the nation.
So many weapons in Somalia, it would be a task that would be enormous in scope, and I wouldn't even want to speculate how long it would take, how many trips it would take.
So the Americans are now running their sky patrols 24 hours a day. They still admit they've got nowhere near enough men and machines to round up and disarm every gunman in Somalia. Flying over Mogadishu illustrates just how tough it would be to weed out all the weapons from the maze of back streets. There's a gun hidden in almost every house. The day before the Americans arrived, Mohammed and his security team were still openly driving their Tetrifle, the local name for a war wagon, proudly carrying the scars of battle. It was in the garage being re-sprayed, ready for a return to civilian life. Like dozens of other technicals which until recently controlled the streets, it will soon blend in unnoticed. But back home, Mohammed still keeps his .50 caliber machine gun in his bedroom. He says he'll never give it up.
So have you used this much in the past? Have you shot this many times? Yeah?
A lot
Another time?
Yeah.
And Mohammed says he'll use it again if the Americans try to disarm him. Jeremy Thompson, ITN, Mogadishu.
Earlier, Jeremy Thompson joined the US Marines as they consolidated their positions around Mogadishu. One of the most strategic locations was a former Soviet airstrip halfway between the capital and the town of Baidoa, at the centre of the famine belt. Despite complaints from some aid agencies that there's been no dramatic improvement in food shipments since the Marines arrived, there has been some progress.
The last relief ship to try entering Mogadishu harbour was shelled and forced to sail away. That was almost 2 months ago. But the Danish freighter Sea Pearl slipped into port unhindered with its cargo of powdered baby food, a sign that the troops have brought some stability. Though not everyone welcomed the arrival, the shipping agents who used to extort large landing fees complained they'd now been cut out.
Well, what are we going to do after they get everything? How do we live?
The problem is that these people here were the people that had some control over the port in the past and demanded many things out of us. But the port now has really under new management.
Also under new management, the military airfield at Baladogli, today turned into the forward base for Operation Restore Hope. Giant transport planes began flying in the second wave of troops. Among them, the US 10th Mountain Division, jets fresh from the snowy wilds of New York State to the oven-hot bush of Somalia.
Oh, good Lord, yes. Snow up to your knees. But, nice.
As criticism grows over the American slowness in reacting to the plight of towns like Baidoa, just 70 miles up the road, they're quickly trying to establish this airbase as a springboard to that main relief operation. The coalition forces have now made it clear that they won't be moving to the famine-hit interior until they've totally secured this forward base and the support systems they need running up-country from here. As always, the prowling helicopters offer protection. The air patrol, in which 2 Cobras destroyed 3 clan battle wagons, has developed into a local controversy. It's now claimed the gangs were fighting amongst themselves and not firing at the helicopters. But it has served as a dramatic warning. Though the Americans say it's not their intention to disarm the whole of Somalia, the air patrols are making sure that no gunmen step out of line.
Time for a break now, then I'll be back with more
CNN's Brent Sadler reports neither the suppliers nor the users of cotton are giving it up willingly.
They steal, kill, and ruin their lives for it. The tree of paradise, Somalia's big tune. There is no government, so no control, and no limit on its sale or use. Cart is big business. Cart is dangerous. It's everywhere, on the streets of Mogadishu, in their mouths, in their lives, and deeply seated in their glazed, suspicious eyes. It looks like an unappetizing bunch of hedge clippings, tastes bitter, and is mildly narcotic.
If people don't get caught, they will get crazy.
The cart kings of Somalia have been virtually unaffected by the civil war and famine. Even at the height of fighting, their small fleet of charter planes ran the gauntlet from Nairobi, 2 hours away. Bush airstrip K-50 and another daily dose of freshly picked cart is being flown into Somalia. The dealers are profit hungry. Their users thirsty to satisfy what is an expensive daily fix. Dealers count out stacks of Somali shillings, equivalent to about $100 for a 25-pound bag. Bricks of money exchange hands in rapid succession. Most of Somalia's dubious import crop is flown in from Kenya, where it's grown legally. Cat will not flourish in Somalia. The multi-million-dollar trade dwarfs that of any other commodity, including food and guns.
Business is business, whatever it is, as long as it's not illegal. It's not illegal to carry this stuff. This stuff is 100% legal in Kenya. It's grown on the hills to the east of Mountain.
Newly arrived aircraft are loaded with cart in every compartment. When it's all sold, tempers fray. They want more. But can't get it until the next day. And this is what's in those bags. 32 tightly bound bundles of stalks and leaves. The market is red hot for cut right now because of fears that the military intervention might disrupt or even cut off supplies. For now, the cart traders have enough space to avoid tangling with the military. But as the troops clamp down on more of the country, the cut runners could get squeezed out. Cart helped finance the gunmen and fanned the flames of civil war. It's become another excess on Somalia's road to ruin. Brent Sadler, CNN, Mogadishu.
When we come back, a journalist.
Robert Oakley arrived in Baidoa just a short time ago. He's there to speak with local officials, apparently to prepare them for the arrival of U.S. troops. Oakley says the U.S. mission in Baidoa will be very similar to what has been done in the capital, Mogadishu.
My purpose in coming here is exactly the same as my purpose in coming to Mogadishu, to help the Somali people understand that the United States military is an instrument of peace, an instrument of enabling them to get the sort of relief and humanitarian assistance which they have been deprived of. And as was the case in Mogadishu, I'm confident they will understand that here. As was the case in Mogadishu, their own leaders have been working hard to tell them this, using their political apparatus and using their radios, and I'm just here to reinforce the message, and I'm confident that it will be successful.
Baidoa is about 200
has moved out of the Somali capital on the road toward Baidoa, of course the central Somali town affected by famine and besieged by bandits. It's widely believed that the operation's aim is to set up a base in Baidoa for the movement of future food convoys. Well, we're joined now on the line by Keith Miller of America's NBC News, who's in Mogadishu just now. Good morning.
The International Red Cross is not immune. Its office was attacked in an orgy of killing one night last week. According to aid workers, up to 70 ended up dead. The staff at the hospital worked for 24 hours dealing with the wounded.
90% of our patients have been surgical, most of them gunshot injuries and related war-related injuries, mines, blasts, and stuff like that.
Colonel Omar Jess controls the city and claims to have stopped the violence, though some say his forces were equally responsible. The colonel wants the Marines to disarm bandits, though predictably he doesn't include his men in that category.
Certainly they did not come here to disarm us. They came here to assist us on help us on taking the humanitarian assistance to the needy people. That's the first step, I think. When we succeed on that, we'll see the steps later.
There's no point simply pushing the weapons off the streets. They reappear. Only a systematic policy of disarming the factions could lift the threat of violence permanently. But the Americans are under pressure to get on with the business of feeding people, regardless of the risks of meeting armed resistance. So today, the first soldiers pulled out of Mogadishu, heading towards the famine zone. Once these support troops are in place, the food wagons will start rolling too. George Allegaya, BBC News, Mogadishu.
The NATO Defense 100 och banditerna i Baidoa har blivit tillsagda att hålla sig undan när de utländska soldaterna kommer fram i natt. De lokala milisledarna har lovat att samarbeta enligt en amerikansk talesman. Baidoa, dit konvojen är på väg, har också kallats Dödens stad. Det är centrum i det område som svårast drabbats av svält och plundringar och många kommit hit från byar runt omkring. Idag sägs de tyngst beväpnade banditerna redan ha lämnat stan efter att de senaste dagarna ständigt plundrat hjälporganisationer innan amerikanernas ankomst. Hjälparbetare har ända sedan de utländska trupperna kom till Somalia för 6 dagar sedan velat att de skulle komma till Baidoa, där det viktigaste och svåraste hjälparbetet nu sker.
Den kvinna som misshandlades svårt igår av en uppretade somalier efter att ha stigit ur en fransk militärbil har nu gripits av milis i Mogadishu. Hon anklagas för prostitution, men den franska militärledningen förnekar att franska soldater haft sexuellt umgänge med kvinnan.
On which the convoy or any truck traffic at all proceeds on into the larger Baidoa area. This is the Red Cross facility, and as a matter of fact, the whole line of humanitarian organizations are located in this part of town. A couple of bridges going over the river that runs through the middle of the city, on down to a checkpoint. This particular checkpoint controls the access to the airfield. It is manned right now by a small organized group that is in charge of security for the airport, Somalis. And then this is the airport area itself. This taxi strip area and adjoining area right here is the places in which most of the humanitarian organizations wait as the food and other equipment is offloaded.
Now, looters grab whatever they can before the troops arrive.
The American and French task force left Mogadishu at dawn. About 70 vehicles and 700 men, watched from the sky by as many helicopters as the military could muster. The troops are due in Baidoa in the morning, not a moment too soon for the relief workers whose compounds have come under frequent attack by gunmen. It's hoped these troops will put a stop to that. But in the meantime, Somali bandits are taking what could be a last opportunity to grab what they can before the troops move in. But America's special envoy flew in first. Robert Oakley travelled to Baidoa for last-minute talks with local warlords, warning them the troops will be there within the next 20 secret meeting with clansmen. Taking Baidoa is a key objective, but in Somalia's countryside, hundreds of thousands are still starving. These people are marooned at the border with Kenya. The frontier is shut and no aid is coming in. Hospitals have been abandoned by relief workers with no supplies. Fever and malnutrition are rife. It's a picture that will be repeated across the country for many weeks to come. Adam Harding, Sky News.
I've been very pleased with the security environment so far, so we hope to start escorting convoys as quickly as possible.
Now the troops are securing the town and a nearby airstrip before bringing in much-needed relief supplies. Marines are patrolling the streets of Baidoa, looking for any of the gun gangs who've been terrorising aid workers and the starving. But all the evidence is that they've left town. Martin Lawson, Sky News.
Well, if you were listening...
Mogadishu is expected to be the next priority. Talks have begun in Geneva on
Something that I think is almost impossible for a foreigner to understand, and they themselves don't know how it's going to come out, but there's an awful lot of work going on, and all I can say is that much of it is peaceful, and that's what we all want to promote. And the more peaceful it is, the better we like it. But there's going to be a lot of squabbling, a lot of negotiating, and I don't envy Ambassador Katani his job. Thank you very much.
And that concludes the replay of the meeting with reporters by Special U.S. Representative to Somalia, Robert Oakley. And he was rather hopeful on this, I guess 1 week after U.S. Marines first waded ashore at Mogadishu. And on the day, just a few hours ago, when the troops, the U.S. Marines and French troops, arrived in the starvation-ridden town of Baidoa. Mr. Oakley said that the reception so far for the troops in Somalia has been a soft landing. He said there has been a friendly reception, and he can't say that that's going to happen elsewhere in the country when the U.S. troops and the French soldiers push out into some of the more remote areas of Somalia. But he still has some hope that that will be the case. He expressed hope that all the warring factions will eventually lay down their arms and work toward peace. He said the key to that will be the cooperation from the various clans, and in fact, last week the two major warlords in Somalia pledged their determination to achieve that, and he expects concrete and visible steps to be taken toward easing some of the lawlessness in Somalia before too long. And that concludes that special report.
National Forces here in Baidoa is coming to the end of its first day, David. There have been no reports of problems or incidents here in Baidoa. The airport has been more or less secured. There's been a good degree of local cooperation, local officials standing up this afternoon and cheering the arrival, saying that it meant a new day here for the people of Baidoa, and the mission of delivering food aid, well, that's already underway. The multinational forces wasted absolutely no time in beginning their job and acting on their mandate to get the food aid where it's needed most. This afternoon, they delivered several hundred pounds of food and several tons of happiness to an orphanage right here in Baidoa. A convoy of French and American troops with several armored vehicles was a sight to see in Baidoa, carrying out the mandate to ensure the safe delivery of food aid.
Our mission when we got landed here was to immediately set up and start escorting convoys to provide protection so they can get these food to these desperate people, and that's what we've done.
The food in this case wasn't a whole lot, a few sacks of flour and other commodities that fit into the backs of two small pickup trucks bound for an orphanage in Baidoa. The protection, on the other hand, was more than adequate. Heavy machine guns, armor-piercing cannon, and well-armed Marines and French legionnaires. Any place else, perhaps, that kind of security would have been ridiculed. But here in Baidoa, gunmen have made it their business to regularly loot the food meant for orphans. The children here would stand little chance of surviving on their own without the support of the local staff, who still fear looters might come and seize their small hoard of food.
We haven't seen guns around today, and probably the looters are in the hiding. But God knows if this is for sure or if they sneak at night time and get something.
The U.S. and French troops who helped protect this food shipment got a chance to meet the people they've come to help firsthand, and they seized the opportunity. For their part, the orphans here showed a lot of enthusiasm as they sang "Welcome, Friends" over and over again. The orphanage director described the effect of the arrival of the multinational troops in a single word.
Liberty. We are breathing a new day.
It doesn't seem like much to ask for, the freedom to be able to feed and care for a house full of orphans. But David, a new day for those orphans means probably a new life for the city of Baidoa. And who knows, perhaps a new future for Somalia itself. I'm Jim Clancy, reporting live. Now back to you, David.
Thank you, Jim, in Baidoa. A few hours after the Marines arrived in that city, the special U.S. envoy to Somalia cautioned against hope for quick new deployment to more cities. Briefing reports on the Baidoa mission, Robert Oakley said the International will proceed with care.
We're proceeding one step and one objective at a time. We're preparing very carefully on the military side and the political side. We're working very closely with responsible Somali leaders in so preparing This careful preparation has, and the very positive Somali response has enabled General Johnston to move to Baidoa somewhat earlier than expected, but we can't say that the examples of Mogadiscio and Baidoa will automatically be replicated elsewhere, because there are parts of the interior where there's more trouble.
Also Wednesday, a French cabinet minister predicted the U.S. will come around to the French view that the force in Somalia should disarm the warring factions. U.S. military leaders say the forces are there only to help deliver food. United Nations officials in Cambodia.
The armed gangs who'd been looting and terrorizing aid agency officials there were nowhere to be seen. Baidoa has been called the epicenter of the Somalian famine, with 100 people dying of starvation every day.
A convoy of US and French troops rumbled into Baidoa at dawn to begin the next phase of the international armed mission to feed Somalia's starving people. The convoy of 670 American Marines and French Foreign Legionnaires left Mogadishu early yesterday. It carried no relief aid but was heavily armed to confront feuding Somali factions.
The arrival of French and American troops will allow us to open up the convoy route between Mogadishu and Baidoa. Now, Terra's only been able to move food in by air since the beginning of August. Now we can bring in thousands of tons of food and supplies.
Before the convoy's arrival, warplanes and helicopters scouted Baidoa for armed gangs to make sure it was safe for the convoy to enter the town. Aid workers have told their own bodyguards to pack away their heavy weapons so that soldiers don't mistake them for looting gangs who've terrorized the city for months. There have been no shooting incidents yet, but the Marines are on a state of high alert after earlier incidents in Mogadishu.
We are going to meet with the relief organizations at 8 o'clock, try to establish an early operation that will push food out into the city. We have been very pleased with the security environment so far, so we hope to start escorting convoys as quickly as possible.
Now the troops are securing the town and a nearby airstrip before bringing in much-needed relief supplies. Marines are patrolling the streets of Baidoa looking for any of the gun gangs who've been terrorizing aid workers and the starving, but all the evidence is that they've left town. Martin Lawson, Sky News.
Well, following the two bombs that escorteras in i staden.
De välkomnades med jubel och applåder. När den 70 fordon starka kolonnen dundrade in i Baidoa mötte den inget motstånd. Banditgängen hade släppt sitt strupgrepp om stan och attackhelikoptrarna behövde inte ingripa. Ombord fanns ingen mat, bara vapen. Vapen som ska säkra vägen för matsändningarna som började anlända bara några timmar efter konvojen. Och när den första sändningen kom till ett av Baidoas barnhem möttes soldaterna med sång. Men för många kommer hjälpen för sent. Här i dödens stad som den kallats har uppemot 100 människor dött av svält och sjukdomar varje dag. Och döden har kommit i sällskap med terrorn från beväpnade banditgäng. De har nu lämnat Baidoa, men runt om i det inre av Somalia fortsätter deras terror. Idag kommer rapporter från staden Bardere där beväpnade klanmedlemmar dödade 10 och sårade lika många när de angrep en hjälpstation för svältande. Så även om hoppet kommit åter till Somalia så är hjälpen långt ifrån framme hos alla de som behöver den.
Waving children lined the roadside as the 70-vehicle convoy rolled into town after a 160-mile journey from Mogadishu. Bandits fled from Baidoa before the soldiers arrived, but elsewhere, the killing continues. In the remote town of Bardera, gunmen have murdered 10 people and wounded 10 more to plunder a feeding center.
The convoy of 700 American and French soldiers had planned to take Baidoa under the cover of darkness. Instead, their 70-vehicle convoy rolled into town in broad daylight when they were told they wouldn't be met with any resistance. That was an understatement. Children lined the road, clapping and cheering as the soldiers moved in. It was a show of strength that had persuaded the bandits to leave town just a few hours earlier, without a shot being fired.
Let's go, Lockhart. Push back on this side, work your way through here, let's go.
As the Marines fanned out to secure Baidoa, they were protected by helicopter gunships which buzzed overhead. Hundreds more reinforcements arrived by air.
We came in the city, you could just tell the reaction of the people. They were very happy, young Americans. And it makes you kind of feel real good about it, that we're doing something for them. Real cheerful. It was pretty nice to see all the little kids smiling, and happy that we're here. Someone appreciates it, especially when it's Christmas time now too, so kind of feel good about yourself.
The troops were even greeted by the local guard, who stood and patiently waited in formation. They'd already handed over their weapons. The next step is to get the aid convoys rolling. The town has undergone a transformation. At the beginning of the week, looting and violence have made it a grim symbol of Somalia's civil war. Adam Harding, Sky News.
Police in Hertfordshire are hunting for...
Called City of Death this morning, bringing with them relief. Jim Clancy reports the troops met no resistance from local gunmen who had been terrorizing the town.
A convoy of French and American troops with several armored vehicles was a sight to see in Baidoa, carrying out the mandate to ensure the safe delivery of food aid.
Our mission when we got landed here was to immediately set up and start escorting convoys to provide protection so they can get these food to these desperate people, and that's what we've done.
The food in this case wasn't a whole lot, a few sacks of flour and other commodities that fit into the backs of two small pickup trucks bound for an orphanage in Baidoa. The protection, on the other hand, was more than adequate. Heavy machine guns, armor-piercing cannon, and well-armed Marines and French legionnaires. Any place else, perhaps, that kind of security would have been ridiculed. But here in Baidoa, gunmen have made it their business to regularly loot the food meant for orphans. The children here would stand little chance of surviving on their own without the support of the local staff, who still fear looters might come and seize their small hoard of food.
We haven't seen guns around today, and probably the looters are in the hiding. But God knows if this is for sure, or if they sneak at night time and get something.
The U.S. and French troops who helped protect this food shipment got a chance to meet the people they've come to help firsthand, and they seized the opportunity. For their part, the orphans here showed a lot of enthusiasm as they sang "Welcome, Friends" over and over again. The orphanage director described the effect of the arrival of the multinational troops in a single word:
liberty. We are greeting a new day.
It doesn't seem like much to ask for, the freedom to be able to feed and care for a house full of orphans. But a new day for the children in that orphanage may mean a new life for the city of Baidoa and a future for Somalia itself. Jim Clancy, CNN, Baidoa, Somalia.
Well, some residents of Baidoa organized a welcome for the troops' arrival. Relief workers in the town had criticized Operation Restore Hope for being slow to move out of Mogadishu and into the nation's interior. But U.S. officials said they wanted to make certain of security before moving on. The U.S. Special Envoy to Somalia says that will be the case as the troops move elsewhere in the country.
We can't say that the examples of Mogadishu and Baidoa will automatically be replicated elsewhere, because there are parts of the interior where there's more trouble, where the situation is more tense. It may be that using the same procedures we can calm it down, so that the overwhelming force which the Marines and others have, if they're obliged to use it, and the political preparation and the friendliness which the Somali people have shown thus far will make a soft landing wherever we go.
American Red Cross President Elizabeth Dole, who is in Mogadishu, says she sees hope returning to the country. She also says she wants to assure Americans their donation will get through to the Somalian people. In the southern Somalian town of Barder, a relief worker claims that Somali gunmen killed 10 people and wounded 10 others at a food center on Monday. He says the gunmen opened fire after they didn't find any food to take. No other relief agencies have reported the incident, and it's not clear why word of the attack took so long to reach them.
Colonnes, ce sont d'anciens soldats somaliens qui occupaient le camp. Américains et Français leur ont demandé de partir. L'aérodrome doit être sûr. Les vols humanitaires vont bientôt recommencer, comme va commencer la vraie mission des militaires.
On va faciliter l'arrivée de la nourriture, la distribution de la nourriture aux points de distribution des ONG et éventuellement, s'il faut rayonner, escorter les convois.
Comme pour rattraper le temps perdu, les choses s'organisent très vite. En fin de matinée, la première réunion entre militaires et organisations humanitaires a lieu. Ces organisations qui, il y a quelques jours, affirmaient que si les soldats ne venaient pas à Baïdoba, c'était un crime.
Nous les avons attendus trop longtemps, à mon avis.
Quelle est la situation aujourd'hui?
J'ai l'impression qu'elle est très calme. Les gens n'ont plus leurs armes à l'épaule, ils les ont remplacées par des pelles. J'ai l'impression que ce sera une belle journée.
Il faut dire que dès leur arrivée, les soldats ont patrouillé en ville. Nouvelle règle locale, pas de civils en armes, et pour la première fois depuis longtemps, peu ou pas de bandes armées visibles. Pour ceux qui essaient de venir en aide à la population, c'est déjà une victoire. Ici, les besoins sont énormes. Même si leur nombre a diminué, on parle toujours de 70 à 80 000 réfugiés dans la région. Des cuisines comme celle-là, il y en a 80 à Baïdoba et dans les environs. L'attente pour un peu de riz y est toujours aussi longue. Ce soir, un certain nombre de ces points de distribution de nourriture ont été ravitaillés en toute sécurité. Demain, dans les jours qui viennent, le nombre de convois humanitaires accompagnés militairement va être multiplié. La mission des soldats français et américains aura atteint alors son rythme de croisière.
Some relief experts estimate that some 3/4 of the children under age 5 in Baidoa have already died of starvation and disease. Well, today, U.S. and French forces finally brought calm to the town of Baidoa, and now relief workers can stop worrying about safety and concentrate on saving the starving. CNN's Gary Stryker takes a look at the situation in Baidoa.
Baidoa celebrates. No longer a fearful town ruled by rampaging gunmen. And for the first time, food aid is delivered in Baidoa under military escort to an orphanage. Little chance this food could be stolen by looters. Rapid changes in a day that began with the arrival shortly after dawn of a long military convoy. 70 vehicles with 532 U.S. Marines and 140 French Legionnaires. The spearhead for multinational forces moving inland for the next stage of Operation Restore Hope. The convoy bypassed the congested center of town, passing crowds of Somalis who had expected the troops today, but nothing like this show of force.
Because the soldiers have come, the city is safe and everything is okay.
There was no resistance here. Most of the gunmen in Baidoa left town last week when they heard the troops were coming. And the word had gone out to everyone with weapons that they should clear the streets before midnight Tuesday. The convoy headed straight for the airfield. This will be the base of operations for multinational forces in the famine area. Until now, most of Baidoa's food relief was airlifted here, but only if aid agencies paid the extortion demanded by the armed gangs. Helicopters brought more Marines from Balidogle airfield, about 50 miles from Mogadishu. In Baidoa, these soldiers get their first look at some of the starving thousands they have come to save.
I've got a starving nation here, and we're here not as